All right, so let's start off with some rapid fire questions for Amanda. So, question one, historical boat sales data is public knowledge.
That is false. It is not.
Yacht brokerage commissions are rarely negotiated away from the 10%.
That's mostly true.
If I am a for sale by owner, I can just list my boat on Yacht World.
100% false. My name is Amanda Haley. I've been a yacht broker now for about 10 years, and it is my passion. I have been my own boss for pretty much my whole life, and I went to what my passion was, which is boating and yachting and sailing in general.
My name is Maryline Bossar. I am a co-founder of Current Yachts, and I'm in the Annapolis area. I also sail offshore in my free time, and I've been in the marine industry for over 15 years, predominantly as a marketer, and I'm excited to help bring buyers and sellers closer to their dream of selling or buying the boat. Welcome to Full Displacement, the new Current Yachts podcast, and this is our very first episode. My name is Maryline Bossar with Current Yachts, and I'm here with my co-founder, Amanda Haley. Hello, Amanda.
Hello, Maryline.
The other person that's joining the podcast today is Sam Durso, and Sam is part of the Current Yachts team. He's our strategist, and he's a serial entrepreneur as well, so we're excited to have Sam on the program. Hi, Sam. How's it going?
Hi, guys. Doing great. Excited to be here.
Thank you for joining us. We wanted to make sure that when we speak about boat sales, yacht sales, we don't stick to the jargon and that we actually keep it real. With a boater like Sam, we'll make sure that this happens today. So today we're going to break down how boats are sold, and that's a very loaded question, as we'll see. By the end of this episode, you'll know more about how boats are sold, more so than most boat owners, actually. And we want to tell you also about what is going on in the industry. There's some major shakeups going on, and this is one of many more episodes where we'll talk about what are the actors at play and what is happening in the market. But before we go on, Amanda, tell me a little bit more about you.
I have been a yacht broker now for over 10 years. It is my passion. I've also been a live aboard sailor for the past 8 years, and I own a small boutique charter company in Placencia, Belize. I'm currently located in Fort Lauderdale, Florida, and spread my time between Belize and Florida. I started working at Denison Yachting and cut my teeth there learning brokerage, which was a great firm to learn the right way to do things. And I was put in a segment of sailboats, which of course is my passion, and learned a lot there selling these beautiful boats. And, it's a lot harder to sell a boat with standing rigging, running rigging, a keel, and those types of things, in my opinion. And sailboaters seem to be these very technical people that will look at every single item. So it really taught me to be a good yacht broker by learning how to sell sailboats. From there, I went and became a yacht broker for charter boats being sold into charter. And that has been my specialty, I would say, for the last 7 years or so. And I've learned a lot now to the point that I actually own a small boutique charter management company down in Belize. So I've covered a lot of different areas of yacht brokerage, and I'm happy to share some of that knowledge.
And what about your background, Sam? You're not in boat sales, but can you tell us a bit more about you and what you bring to this conversation?
Yeah, sure. I've been an entrepreneur for 25 years now. Been in technology, e-commerce, advertising, mergers and acquisitions. And, right now we work on helping companies launch and scale and strategy and doing anything they can to get off the runway. I love working with startup companies. I've been doing that all my whole career. I've owned about 25 companies myself. And I live here in Jupiter, Florida. We have great boating down here. It's a great place to be. And I've had a couple boats myself. And always love boating and really excited about Current Yachts and, excited to be here.
So I won't hold it against you, but it sounds like you're a powerboater.
I am. I got into it. My son loves fishing and, he got me into it. So, typical center console, where we are in Jupiter, you just go out the inlet and within 30 miles, it's the best fishing you could ever imagine. So we're really spoiled here.
Yeah. Did you know if you're a captain, that's one of the questions on your US Coast Guard is where is the Gulf Stream closest to the United States? And it is Jupiter, Florida. So
Very
that's
cool.
why the pelagic fish are so close
Y-
to the coast there.
Yeah, we're very spoiled here, very spoiled.
That's awesome.
Okay, so guys, what made you launch this podcast and what's the goal?
I think the primary goal is education. We had a bit of a aha moment after the Annapolis Boat Show. Our friend Bobby White from Selling Doodle published a short interview about Current Yachts, and Amanda and I were talking about what we launched. And we became aware that there's the need for more education on how boats are sold, on how brokers work, on how you can maximize your success when you sell your boat or when you buy your boat. So we wanted to offer this education to both buyers and sellers and general knowledge on how the market is run. And we felt that that was the right time to do so because we saw that there was a lot of interest in this type of content. And we're here to really provide education to both the sellers and buyers of boats.
And it's interesting, this industry really hasn't changed much in 30 years. The way things have been done hasn't changed in that period of time. And we know with the way the internet is changing, with AI and all these different things, that the brokerage industry, along with the real estate industry, should change and keep up with the times.
And why the name Full Displacement? Where did that come from?
So the title, full displacement, is a boating term. And it's a play on words a bit with a displacement hull. And displacement is something that we're doing in this industry because we're shaking things up. We're changing the way brokerage is done and going from a commission based model to a service based model. So we thought the name full displacement would be quite suitable and appropriate.
Very cool.
So, setting the stage for this episode here, we're talking about recreational boat sales. Obviously, not all boat sales happen with a yacht broker, but that is the segment we're going to focus on. A lot of you may not know the size of the U.S. fleet, recreational boats, represent over 7 million vessels. Now, the majority of those are smaller boats, and the type of boats that we're focusing on in yacht brokerage sales tend to be higher price points, typically a little bit larger. And those are the boats we're going to be mostly talking about today. And the data that is available to us on boat sales that are happening for all market sizes, including brokerage and including private sales, is available through registration data and state title data. So again, you have basically two main sources for this data that is collated at the national level, the U.S. Coast Guard documented boats, and then the state registered boats. So this data together gives us a sense of the size of the market as a whole. So
Wow, 7 million boats in the US. And that doesn't even include outside of the country. So it's interesting. There's a lot of boats changing hands, I'm sure.
yeah, I think the stat we have on this is about 10 to 15% of boats change hands every year. So that's very interesting, isn't it?
Yep, it is.
When did buying and selling a boat get so complicated?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think it's been complicated for a while, and I just think it needs some guidance and some steps to make it less complicated. Just like any transaction that is of significance, monetary significance, you should have the right guidance to be able to make it more smooth.
And I think what's really shocking too is the lack of regulation on this industry compared to real estate. So we often will compare yacht sales to car sales or real estate, where there's a lot more protection for the consumer in general for these type of purchases. Because I think recreation and boating is considered luxury, there's not so much of an incentive or even a community out there, rooting for the rights of the boat owner. It's like first world problem, I suppose. But the fact that there's so little regulation and so few protections, that is something also to be aware of. So we really recommend that folks work with at least licensed brokers who are bonded, know what those terms even mean, do a bit more research because it's really wide open, and in some ways it can be a little scary when you're buying a boat for the first time.
And did you know, Maryland, there are only two states in the entire US that require licensure for yacht brokerage. So, Sam, can you guess what those two states are that require licensure?
I'm going to guess Florida because I'm
Okay,
here.
bingo. Yep,
Yep. And I'll say California.
bingo. Very good guesses. Those are the two states.
Yep.
With a caveat, and we'll talk about the state of Maryland, but we've also researched the requirements in Virginia and Maryland, and you would think it should be a lot simpler than it is. It's a little interesting too, because if you ask many states, we're going through this process right now, they won't actually know if you are required to be licensed. We can just say a quick word about the state of Maryland. We are a yacht brokerage company only selling used boats, and we've been talking to the state of Maryland for about 8 weeks now about
8
whether or
weeks.
not we should be a licensed dealer slash yacht brokerage company in the state of Maryland. And they do not know the answer. We've been looking for that answer. We do not have today a place of business in the state of Maryland, and therefore we're not a Maryland company. I happen to be located in Maryland. Does that make me, a Maryland-based broker that therefore must be licensed? We know and we see that every yacht brokerage company, wherever they are, have boats listed everywhere. And the state of Maryland does not actually know if the boat being in Maryland would require the yacht brokerage representing that seller to be licensed in Maryland. So not only are there very few regulations, the ones that are there can't really be enforced if you don't know what the rules are. We're going directly to the state of Maryland asking these questions, and we don't know the answer to this day. They're working on it. They don't know. They told us we're investigating and they're elevating
Yeah.
to the next person. But again, how can you even enforce rules that you don't really understand? Why does it take this long? Anyway, so that's a matter for another day. We'll keep you posted. But yes, the fact that the industry is less regulated is definitely a factor in how things can also get really complicated really fast. And another aspect is boats move. It's not like a condo, right? It can be registered in a foreign country. It could be not made in the US. All of these implications make for much more complicated transactions because there are more steps involved, such as importing a vessel, such as reporting certain things that are going on with the vessel, deregistering the boat, re-registering the boat. It's complicated because it's not as straightforward as a house, simply put.
So, as a buyer, why would I need a broker? Can I just do it myself?
Yeah, you absolutely can do it yourself. But as Marilyn was stating, some of these complications make it very hard for you to know how to do it correctly. Let's say you want to buy a boat that's down in the Caribbean that's registered in Sri Lanka. Would you know how to get it deregistered from that territory and then imported into the state of Florida and then registered in the state of Florida? So this is where guidance and knowledge really comes into play for a broker.
That makes sense. And would I need my own broker or can I just go to the selling broker for that?
You could definitely go to the selling broker and ask for their help in that way. But remember, they have no fiduciary responsibility to you in any way because they are an agent of the seller. Actually, we are the first brokerage company to offer a buyer's representation agreement, and we'll tell you about that more.
Okay, perfect.
The other thing too is, simply put, buyers need a lot more handholding, especially when they don't know quite what they're getting into. We're speaking now with a lot of dreamers who have looked at the sailing channels and they want to live the dream of cruising the Caribbean or around the world with their family for a year or two, and they want to know how to go about it. So our job is much more than just a transaction, really. It's about guiding those buyers who have a lot of questions, and we need to make sure that they're guided properly so they don't make any costly mistakes that would be devastating. So I would say it's even more important for a buyer to have a broker because then you have someone that's watching out for you. And of course, we then give you access to inventory and boats, and we make sure that you're looking at the right boats too. So super important.
Yeah, that makes sense. At the end of the day, I just don't want to get ripped off or, buy a boat that's just going to have problems afterwards and, all of those issues.
Yeah, there a lot of it comes into the interview that I give with a client. And my first question is, what do you want to do with your boat? Tell me your dreams. How do you want to use this vessel? And from there, it really helps me tailor what vessels I will show them. A lot of people will want a really good price boat, and they don't realize that good price means it's going to be a fixer upper and they have no skills in fixing a boat up. So at that point, I'm going to have to say, well, let's look for a newer boat that doesn't quite require such maintenance issues and service in the beginning. So there's a lot of things that I will ask and learn from a client in that first interview to be able to steer them in the right direction, if you want to say.
Pun intended. Um, So, through this conversation of how boats are sold, we're going to look at both the seller and the buyer journey. Let's start with the seller journey. Amanda, would you tell us what is the first thing that you do to work with a seller, potentially convince them to sell their boat, say with Current Yachts?
All right. Selling with Current Yachts is very different than the traditional model. Most of the time, they'll say, okay, sign here this listing agreement, and it's a 10% commission. Sometimes it will be negotiated to an 8% commission. If they have both sides of the deal, meaning they bring the buyer and the seller, they will reduce their commission. That's the traditional model. With us, we actually are a service based model. So we will tell the seller, hey, do you know how much your boat is worth? That's the first question. They may or they may not know. What I will then do is go through a comparable market analysis. I'll look at what boats are currently on the market and what they're priced at. And then I'll go back and I'll look back in sold boats data and history and be able to say, okay, due to what I see on the market today and what has sold in the past, and I'll also look at the equipment on their vessel and how it is specced out. A lot of the times, a boat will have all these extras that have then made the boat price rise to the higher level of what the market shows. And other times, a boat will be old, some things will be broken, and that'll be shown on a seller disclosure, which will then make their boat be listed on the lower scale.
Gotcha. And actually, this is also part of the work that we do at Current Yachts is reviewing your vessel, making sure that the equipment list that you provided does match. So we're not missing anything. Obviously, there's a lot of details on a boat, more so than a car or a house. So you have to really go deep and look at all the details, verify that what we're stating is correct. The problem that we're seeing a lot is listings aren't accurate. And so that creates a lot of just frustration from buyers who are looking at a boat and then they're seeing wrong information or they find out when they go see a boat. You can't do that. So we make sure that the boat description matches. That's important. And then, Amanda, tell us also about seller disclosure. What is it and why is it the first thing that you ask from a potential boat candidate for your buyers, and why does it matter?
Well, a seller's disclosure is very important. And that's one of the things I'll ask a seller is, has your boat ever been damaged? Is there anything that I need to be able to tell a future buyer about this vessel before they go ahead and make an offer? Because if there is something that is damaged on this vessel, it's very important for me to know that.
Now I'm dying to ask Sam, when you bought your boat, were you given a seller disclosure?
I was not. I don't think I was, unless it was one of those things that I just overlooked.
Part of a packet that nobody reads? And
Probably.
what did you learn after you took ownership of the boat? Were there any discrepancies,
Um,
surprises?
Major surprises. It was, it was a Grady White, a pretty, it was a decent, center console. So it was, wasn't exactly what I thought I was getting, but it wasn't bad. It was typical like a car sale, actually. Maybe there's some extra dings and nicks and here and that, but overall it was pretty good quality.
Was it a private sale or did you buy it through a dealership?
It was a private sale.
Okay.
I have a follow-on question to when you were saying on the comparable sales. Where do you get that information? Is there like a Zillow for boats?
Actually, on the back end of Yacht World, there is a historical data called sold boats that is or is not accurate. These days, we can't trust the information that is there as much as we could in the past. A lot of sales will take place, and those sales will not be recorded. And so the data that's in there, you have to take with a grain of salt because not all the time is it accurate.
And so we talked a little bit about how the boat is valued and then you sign a listing agreement. And there's another area where the traditional brokerage model and current yachts differ. Can you talk to the co-brokerage terms, Amanda, that are part of the conversation that we have with our sellers?
Sure. So, as I was stating before, on the traditional model, you sign the 10% listing agreement and you go on with life. And your broker doesn't even ask you if you want to open your boat for co brokerage or not. And you can see there, if you read the terms of your agreement and all the fine print, that it is just assumed that the listing broker will actually share a portion of his 10% commission with a co-broker. In our model, we actually say, hey, seller, are you willing to compensate a broker that brings a buyer? And if so, how much are you willing to compensate them? Right now, we're recommending that the compensation be at least 4%, but they have a choice to set it at 2, 3, 4, 8. It doesn't matter. It's up to the seller to decide if they want to open their boat for co-brokerage and at what percentage they are willing to compensate that broker.
Obviously the real estate commissions just got completely blown up. I mean, is our boats next?
I think so. We were just discussing that very model when we came up with our approach for current yachts. So let me backtrack a second. Our first objective was to really drive the inventory and be a great resource for sellers and be fairly priced and service based and offer all these benefits. But that left us out of the driver's seat for buyer side commission, which, as Amanda just said, is typically in the hands of the seller's agent. In real estate, like you just said, things have shifted and people still don't quite understand it. In fact, we're going to have an episode on that alone to compare real estate, how it is now, to the yacht brokerage industry. And the first point is that the fact that this co-brokerage conversation needs to happen, that is derived directly from the real estate settlement. So we need to bring the transparency to this conversation, just like real estate needed it so badly. And we are, I guess, a pioneer in this conversation because we're challenging a set model, which, by the way, could be construed as price setting. And we don't want to be setting commission. We're just having this conversation and telling sellers and buyers how they're set.
I guess as a seller, my main concern would be I want to make sure I'm selling it for the right price as quickly as I can, and I want to pay fair commission. And I think that would be my concerns.
We're sharing what the levers are to get there. Absolutely. So, I mean, Amanda, we've seen a few sellers that initially wanted to close the boat to co-brokerage, and perhaps after a few weeks, we reevaluate. And if the traction isn't there, then we definitely urge them to reconsider co-brokerage. We are very pro co-brokerage, to be sure. I think there was a misunderstanding when we first launched Current Yachts that other brokers felt we were not collaborating brokers. That couldn't be farther from the truth. We're transparent brokers. We ask our sellers and our buyers to be aware of how things work and to set the rules. And we execute the rules. We just implement the plan that our sellers and buyers give us. So, Amanda, can you clarify for our listeners who Current Yachts works for the best and who it may not be appropriate for at this stage?
Our business model starts to make sense for boats that are priced $250,000 above, and you'll see that in our seller calculator. We are certainly not trying to pull the wool over anyone's eyes, but most brokerage houses will have a minimum selling expense because there is so much involved that takes place when you represent a vessel.
And we will put a link to the seller calculator in the show notes so you can take a look at this. Thank you again for this clarification. That's very helpful. And so, what about those with boats priced under that number? What can they expect?
We're working on an offer that we will bring out very soon for those sellers whose assets are on that lower threshold. So stay tuned.
And it's a little tricky because, of course, at the moment, we have a limited number of brokers at Current Yachts, and we've mostly been focused on sellers. We have signed a few buyer rep agreements with potential buyers, and it is our desire to have our buyers sign that agreement before they work with us, if they choose us to assist them in locating and negotiating on their behalf.
Hey, Amanda, so have you ever shown a boat and when you got there, the listing said X, but it really had Y, or you had surprises?
Yeah, actually, it went as far as going to survey. And the boat said it's a Volvo engine, and it ended up being a Yanmar. So something as basic as what kind of engine is in the vessel was a completely different brand. And that's where it comes down to the listing broker actually going out to the vessel and taking a checkbox and saying, okay, I was given a spec sheet that said this, but in actuality, that little Garmin display was replaced and now it's a Raymarine or something like that. So many things can change on these vessels, and owners don't always keep the most accurate lists of what was changed or what was done. And it's very important for that listing broker to go out there and double check and say, okay, it has a Yanmar engine, not a Volvo.
It's similar in real estate where you've got some really great brokers, you've got some really bad brokers. So I'm assuming there's a lot of brokers that, they just take the phone call, they throw the listing up there, they wait for the phone to ring. Maybe they're not doing a lot on the disclosures. Um, so what would you say to critics who argue that Current Yachts is threatening the 10% commission model?
Just like in any industry, there are good and lazy brokers. I consider myself to be one of the good brokers, and I was trained in a very large firm who taught me good things. There are other brokerages out there that have cut corners, that have not been taught all of the correct things to do. And that may show in less than accurate specifications or in pictures that are dark. And it's because they can. And boats can get sold with this low bar. And what we're trying to do at Current Yachts is raise the bar and say, hey, you know, we believe that being paid X for this service is what is fair. So at Current Yachts, we are offering exceptional services at a very fair compensation.
And if we are threatening some of the lazy brokers, so be it. We're just here to educate buyers and sellers. We're not forcing anyone into doing something they don't want to do. And again, we collaborate happily with hardworking brokers and we'll pay a co brokerage if that is what the seller wants us to do.
So Amanda, what would you say the biggest pricing mistakes sellers make when they're trying to sell their boat?
Emotional. They are emotionally attached to their boat and they say, well, I bought it for this and I put so much into it and I just put on new bottom paint and I just redid the electronics and I just redid this and that. And they don't realize that some of these upgrades that they put on because they wanted them is not what the market demands at this time. And I have to bring reality to a seller and basically say, some of those upgrades that you spent all that money on because you wanted it may not bring you the kind of return that you're looking for when you price this boat.
Yeah, I guess it sounds a lot like real estate as well, similar things.
Hmm. Yep.
So talking about pricing mistakes, because I'm sure there's unrealistic sellers and, trying to come up with the right price, they're emotional, they have some number in their head. What about holding costs? How should those come into play on listing that boat? And then how long does it typically take to sell a boat? Just so they can kind of be aware of that.
Yeah, that's a really good question that I discuss with my sellers. How much are you paying each month to afford this boat? Okay, so you've got your insurance. Every month you're paying for the hull to be cleaned. You've got the boat washing people coming. And it may take 4 to 6 months for your boat to sell once listed on these platforms. So if we price the boat at X and we sit around and we wait, every month that we sit around and wait could eat up any equity that you would have had in selling your boat at a lower price point had you priced it more aggressively in the beginning. So, these are things that we really need to discuss and take into consideration when we set that listing price so that you can be aggressive yet well placed and well positioned in the market to be able to get the most equity out of your asset.
Yeah, I think in real estate, it's very similar. And I've seen, when the market starts turning and sellers say, well, my neighbor made, that much more last month. I'm going to price it the same way. And then now 6 months go by. And I've found that seller, it's not really their fault. They just really haven't had the tough questions asked to them and to put the numbers down and to really go, wow, that is costing that much. I have HOA fees. I have all these other fees going on. And, so that makes sense to bring that up front. Yeah, that's great.
And I think it's very common actually for sellers to not be honest with themselves and adding up, as Amanda was saying, insurance, slip fees, everything else. Don't be shy. Put the real number in there because you want to know how much you're going to take out of that yacht equity if it takes 6 or 12 months to sell. And so, what is the next step? We've provided a valuation report. We've shared the market analysis with the seller. They have signed their listing agreement, which with Current Yachts, by the way, you start building your listing and you sign your listing agreement online. You pay the $1,500 required listing prep and promotion to get your boat listed on all the major platforms. And so now it's up to you to get this listing live and promoted to get it sold. So, how long does that process take, Amanda?
Well, we just had an example last week of a seller that came to us, learned about our new model, signed his listing agreement online, chose some media services that he paid for. And from the point that he signed his listing agreement online to the point where we actually went out, did professional videography, and then had his boat up for sale on Yacht World was a matter of 2 weeks. And in my opinion, that's very fast to have professional photography and videography and have a very beautiful listing up
And if
there.
you're curious to see what that boat looks like, look it up. It's the Leopard 46 power catamaran called Prelude, and we'll link to it in the show description. That was a fabulous walkthrough and stunning photography. Again, it's a $1.5 million yacht. You shouldn't have any less than 50 photos and a professional video walkthrough. That looks really, really good. Talk to us a little bit more about the quality of the assets that were obviously produced in this case and how it's in the hands of the seller. And again, we know photography and videography sells, right?
Well, it's really interesting. If you go and you look on the platform, let's say Yachter or Yacht World, the two largest MLS platforms, you'll see a very clear difference between professional photos and photos that are taken from someone's phone on the dock with vendors out. And in my opinion, it is sacrilege to take a vessel of over $300,000, not promote it in its best light. And that's what I know we're attempting to do at Current Yachts is show the asset in its best light. And to do that, you are going to pay for media services and you are going to own those media. They are not going to be the property of your listing brokerage house. They're going to be your property used to promote your asset in its best light.
Sam, I have a question. When you go browse for boats, because I know, of course you said you're not buying a boat at the moment, but we're always looking. Can you tell the difference between those professional listings and the photos taken in a hurry just to get the job done and check the box?
Yeah, I mean, it's surprising. It seems like a majority, and there's a lot of boats out there that it just seems like here's a couple quick pictures. There's very dark lighting, horrible angles, and maybe there's like a small handful of pictures. I feel like I'm always looking for more. And honestly, I just move on. I don't even look at those listings. It's very similar to real estate or even cars. You almost feel like is this just a lazy broker, kind of like real estate? There's a lot of lazy realtors here in Florida. All of the boats, cars, homes I bought, it definitely attracted me when there was great photography and video, and especially now where it's so much easier to do.
And then the last part that Amanda was touching on too was the choice of the platforms. So it is so timely and so deep of a topic that we'll have a separate episode just on that. But the platform selection is super important. You need to have a multi platform strategy now. You can't avoid it. I'll tell you what happened in a nutshell. You can learn more about it on our website. The Boat Group company, that's the parent of Boat Trader and Yacht World, is a company that has a very unique model. They're actually funded by brokerage companies that pay to advertise their listings on these websites. And this group also owns other websites of similar nature in Europe and other places. So they definitely have the monopoly on the market or have had the monopoly on the market. And what's happened is over the past few years, the pricing has surged to incredible levels. And a lot of brokerages are starting to jump ship and they're going elsewhere. And the industry, led by IYBA, that stands for International Yacht Brokers Association, started their own platform called Yachter. It's Yacht with an R. And this is also where we advertise our boats. We believe in this initiative very much. We believe that the yacht brokerages should have control over their inventory, and this is a great way to do that. But until the buyers become aware of this platform, we need to continue to be where the buyers are. And it's becoming fragmented. It's not single platform, as I was saying. So we'll have a conversation around this because it keeps on changing. But as brokers leave one platform and go to another, it means as a seller, you need to have your boat multiple places. And as a buyer, you need to now look in all these different platforms. So you've probably come across, Right Boat or the yacht market in the UK. There's going to be others, and it actually makes our job a little bit more difficult, and it makes it difficult for buyers and sellers. So more on that soon, but we are very much a multi-platform company, and we continue to advertise the boats where the buyers are. And we'll talk about this, as I said, in a future episode. If you have any questions on this, please put your comments below. All right, Sam, what do we have next?
So listing my boat with Current Yachts, for example, will I have to also list it on all these other websites?
No, when you sign a listing agreement with Current Yachts, you are basically hiring us to advertise your vessel on both Yacht World, Yachter, our social media channels, our website, and any other platforms that we may deem appropriate to get eyes on your asset in order to get it sold.
So what would the benefit be for me to hire Current Yachts, for example, versus another broker?
Well, I can speak to the listing services because at least when you pick your services, including video and photography, you know exactly what you're going to get. So you are ensuring top quality for your listing versus hiring another broker and not knowing for sure how much time they're really going to dedicate to putting together a professional listing. So what we can guarantee you is by purchasing those itemized listing services, you're going to elevate the quality of your listing considerably. And then number two, if you look at the seller calculator, you will see that the cost to sell your boat with Current Yachts is a fraction of a traditional broker, and the co-brokerage portion of it remains only applicable if a co-broker is present. In other words, you may have a listing open for co-brokerage at, say, 5%, but a direct buyer comes to buy your boat, they will buy their boat without representation, and you're not going to pay that 5%. So we set a seller side commission, and the buyer side commission is separate. So that's very important. And we have actually a video on co-brokerage we're going to link to in a little bit.
Okay. And then one follow-up question on that. What about exposure? How will I make sure that you would give me the best exposure compared to other brokers out there?
That's a great question because all the other brokers will place your asset on the same exact platforms, such as Yacht World, Yachter, and maybe not even some of the platforms that we will place your vessel on, such as niche sites, or their social media network will not be as large as some of the others.
Yeah, we're being very intentional with our marketing. And so we're developing our own strategies to promote your listing to the right folks that are browsing those listing sites outside of the listing sites. So it's a multi-channel strategy, right? You're going to do Google search ads, you're going to do Meta ads, you're going to do, of course, events. So ask your broker before you sign a listing agreement, what platforms are you going to list my boat on? And what else are you going to do to put my boat front and center? And part of our strategy, too, of course, is we emphasize videos so heavily. We want to make sure that those videos in short and long formats are everywhere to be seen.
Awesome. Have you ever had to stop a buyer from falling in love with the wrong boat?
um, I think that that comes down to what the buyer really wants. And I think I can draw a very fair conclusion by just saying, you may love this boat, but it's going to cost you X, 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 X to fix this boat. You may, and then once I add up all the X's and they realize that it just prices that boat like to the hilt, they can come down off of that emotional ledge and say, okay, that might not be the best boat for me.
It could be that the best strategy is we make sure they don't look at boats that they should not fall in love with.
Sure.
Right? I mean, I've had a situation where we were trying to sell this 4-cabin monohull, and folks would come to see it and wanted to make it a 3-cabin. And at that price point, redoing the forward bulkhead to turn this 2-cabin forward into a master just wasn't going to be making sense. So you need to also do your part when you're qualifying the buyers to make sure that, you don't want to waste their time. You don't want to waste your time. And it's all a matter of, yes, accurate representation, qualifying properly. And again, they won't fall in love if they don't get to see it. But as long as they understand the why, and we can educate based upon pricing, equipment, feature, location. Some folks have really unrealistic expectations of trucking boats from across the country. I'm sure, Amanda, you've come up with examples of folks that would have to travel so far to see a boat that's probably not worth it.
Yeah, regions are very important. I'll ask people, well, what is your expectation of where you're going to pick up this boat? I've seen a lot of beautiful blue water cruisers out on the west coast of the United States, and people want them over here on the east coast, and they don't realize that it will take months or a shipping cost of over $100,000 on a ship to get that boat through the Panama Canal and over to the east coast. And then when you tack that on to the price point, and vice versa, the buyer will be on the West Coast. And I'm like, well, in order to get it there, you're going to have to pay a crew at least $40,000 to get that boat there because they're looking at something in the Caribbean. So, region, um, price point is very important.
And then what's the biggest mistake smart people make when buying a boat?
Smart people.
They don't buy boats.
Trick question.
Well, I think all buyers are smart buyers. Let's phrase that accurately. But I can definitely guide people and bring them back to my original question, which is why are you buying a boat? Are you buying a boat to place into charter? Are you buying a boat to have fun with your family? Are you buying a boat to cruise around the canals of your backyard and drink a beer? Go back to the why. And then that will help a buyer make
Mhm.
smart decisions and be continually smart.
All right, Amanda, let's talk about the buyer journey next. Can you talk to us about the buyer qualification?
So I just ask a lot of questions and I listen. I listen to what they want out of the vessel. And then I ask, okay, what's your budget? Where are you going to keep this boat? Do you know how much it costs to own a boat like this? There are so many pre qualifying questions that a buyer needs to think through before he even starts to look. And a lot of that has to do with financing and the timeline. I can't tell you how many people I have talked to 3 years before they actually bought a boat because they had to prepare. First, I have to sell my house. Then my dog has to die. And then this has to happen. And all these steps have to take place before they can actually fulfill the dream of how they see themselves using this boat. So, pre qualifying questions for a buyer for me are probably the most important qualifications when it comes to that. Getting them educated. And that's what Current Yachts is all about, is getting people educated before they actually pull the trigger on buying a yacht.
How long does it take to actually buy a yacht, assuming that I'm ready and I already sold the house, my dog already passed away, all of those things have happened. Assume I'm ready to go. What does it typically take to buy the boat, complete the transaction, and have that boat?
I would say anywhere from a month to 6 weeks is a good timeline. I've seen it happen as quickly as 4 days from pulling the trigger. Um, but that is in a circumstance where you're paying cash. There's no liens on the vessels. It can take a lot longer in instances. And I would say anywhere from 4 to 6 weeks is a good time frame.
And so, talk to us then about the buyer representation agreement and why it's important and why it's different.
So we are doing something very different with our buyer's representation agreement. And this basically protects the buyer. In this case, with Current Yachts, you are signing on the dotted line to hire Current Yachts to be your representative and bring vessels to your attention, but also to work for you in the negotiations of a sale of a boat. And I don't know if everybody knows this, but when you have the normal co-brokerage agreement, You are not signing anything with your broker, and they are actually a sub agent of the listing broker. So no one has the buyer's fiduciary responsibility at heart. They all have the same goal in mind, which is to get the boat sold for the highest price point, because that is what makes them the most money.
So without that agreement, what protection would I have as a buyer?
Only your broker's ethics. And
Yeah.
that's very important. And
Yeah.
I'm not trying to say that brokers aren't ethical. What I'm trying to say is this agreement actually puts in place what those ethics are and puts them written out onto paper. It also protects you financially. With Current Yachts, we are offering something very different. So you are signing a buyer's representation agreement with us to financially compensate us for our time in helping you buy a boat. But if there is a co-brokerage agreement where we are making more than what you have signed on the dotted line to compensate us, we will actually give you up to 2% of the cost of that boat back as a buyer's credit. Now, this won't happen all the time, but it does happen in the traditional model where there is a 10% commission at stake. 5% goes to the listing broker, 5% goes to the buyer's broker or the selling broker, the person who brings the buyer. And in this case, if that's more than what we've contracted on in our buyer's representation agreement, we will give that back to the buyer as a buyer's credit.
Going back to what protection you have, it's the difference between law and what you should do. The IYBA has a very strict code of ethics, and we've seen a lot of instances where yacht brokers who are members of IYBA simply take shortcuts and don't always follow the code of ethics. We take it seriously, and in fact, we encourage all yacht brokers to be members of IYBA, but there is no law to back you up if something goes sideways. And the best thing to do is to at least study your options and know what agency representation means. So it's another parallel to real estate. One of
Yes.
the consequences, right? And you would know this because you're actually licensed. Sam, tell us what that meant for the real estate world for buyer rep.
Yeah, in Florida, when there's a listing broker and then the buyer comes and then we can convert to a transaction broker and we have to, act honestly and ethically and all of those things, but we don't have fiduciary duty. We can't for both sides. It's a little different because in boating, it sounds like they're representing the seller no matter what. In Florida, we can represent the transaction and kind of back off and not pick one side. But it's still confusing a little bit. So in boating, it seems like buyers probably do they feel like they have representation even if they didn't sign a listing agreement? I would think that they feel like they're going to get treated better than they probably are going to get treated.
I think it comes down to trust. Remember, I've made my living in this industry for the last 10 years, and this buyer's representation agreement that Current Yachts is putting out into the industry is brand new. So I'm an ethical broker. I think when I have acted as a um, agent for both parties, I have done my best to be fair to both sides. But it's a fine line, especially when my goal is to make money by selling boats. It is a very hard line to keep both understandings fair. So that's where I think we will see a shift in this industry moving more towards buyer's representation in these channels. A lot of the times, too, when we are putting forth a service based model where the boat is being priced with only one broker being compensated.
Yeah. Yeah. In real estate now, over the past year, buyers have to sign a representation agreement, even if they want to see one house for one day. And it's really disrupting the industry, and making buyers uncomfortable and they don't know what to do. And so it is really frustrating. And
And change is hard. We get it. So we believe there's room in this industry for change, and we are about to bring that change for our buyers. And it's fine. If you do not want to have a buyer rep agreement, you don't have to have one. You can choose a broker that will not sign one, or you can come to Current Yachts unrepresented and you will not get the full guidance. You will just get the transaction support like we were talking about. It's perfectly okay to come unrepresented and buy a boat that is listed by Current Yachts. Okay, so we talked a little bit about co-brokerage, which is great. And then, so Amanda, would you talk us through the steps then? Let's say you're helping the buyer find a vessel and maybe they do find one. Kind of talk us through what does happen over the next few weeks for that buyer.
Okay, so let's say that the buyer now has decided on this boat. I want to go see this boat right here. I would accompany them and bring them to the vessel, give them a walkthrough. They say, "Great, this is the boat for me. I want to make an offer." So at that point, we would agree upon a price that we would offer to the seller. And that comes with a purchase and sale agreement. At that point, the purchase and sale agreement is presented to the listing broker, and that listing broker is beholden to then take that offer to the seller, to the owner of the vessel.
And can you speak to on the showing confirming the brokerage terms?
So before I would actually take a client to look at a boat, I would call the listing broker and I would ask them about any disclosures that need to be told to my buyers. I would also ask them about the co-brokerage terms. If there is the what the co-brokerage terms are. Most of the time, they're going to be a 50-50 split. Sometimes it's different than that. But I will at least learn what those co-brokerage terms are before showing the vessel to my buyers.
So what happens if you call that other broker and they say there's no co-brokerage? Do you walk away with that buyer?
So there's the tricky question. Most brokers, if they don't have a buyer's representation agreement signed, will then not show that boat to their prospective buyers, even though it may meet all of their requirements. Besides being good to their buyer, what motivation would they have to then show that boat because there's no room in them for them to get paid?
But
So it's a
nothing
really
nothing precludes that broker to negotiate a compensation with their buyer if they're very clever and motivated, right?
sure. I mean, at this point, if it's the boat they want to see, I'll say to them and be honest, there is no co-brokerage room in here for me to make any money. Are you willing for it to pay me for my services at that point? And it's a really uncomfortable situation for most brokers. A lot of the time they'll just shy away and find another boat that's open for co-brokerage without actually saying, "Hey, there's no room in this for me to make any money. Are you going to be the one that compensates me?"
And we eliminate this tricky question because in our buyer rep agreement, we state what that compensation is. And that means that any private listing is open for our buyers to look at, and they'll know when they factor in their offer that the compensation of their broker is just an add on. So it's just a math equation. It's not really that hard, but the gymnastic you have to train your brain to do, it's a big shift. As we said before, change is hard. But
Well, it's good that you're being open about it also because it's the exact same thing going on in the real estate industry right now, and it's crazy times. So I think it is changing. So it's good that you guys are open about that.
all right, so now continue on to the boat that the buyer's chosen. What are the steps that you guide them through, all the way from the first showing that they fell in love with the boat, sign their purchase and sale agreement, to closing?
So once a purchase and sale agreement is agreed upon and the buyer and seller have signed it, at that point, the buyer will need to deposit 10% of that agreed amount into a trust account of the broker, and a survey date will be set. After the survey date, there will be an accept reject date. So a survey happens, it takes a few days, they get a report back. After the report, there may or may not be more negotiations set, and then there will be the closing date. So this is where it comes into play, where it could be those 4 to 6 weeks once a purchase and sale agreement is signed.
So then a survey, is that kind of like the home inspection?
Yeah, absolutely. There's a lot of things in a survey that is a third party, unbiased opinion, basically, is this vessel, of course, through disclosures and things like that, the listing broker is going to portray that vessel in its best light and as accurately as he possibly can. But there are things that are under the waterline or things that may come up on survey that they didn't know about. And at that point, they asked X for the vessel, thinking it was in X condition. And then the survey finds that, oh no, by the way, that generator that you thought was working doesn't work. And it's now $25,000 to fix that. So then the price point will be negotiated post survey for lots of little things. Often it will be a survey allowance or an escrow holdback or just a straight rejection because that boat had significant damage that we were not aware of.
It
So
happens.
there's a lot of things that will come into play post survey that you will need. I think that's where a broker actually earns the most of his money is during that time.
What percentage of deals get killed at this point?
That's interesting. I would say 1 out of 10 transactions will reject after a survey. Most of the time, something can be negotiated to make the deal happen.
And do you think that's high because there's a lot of bad brokers out there that, aren't doing their homework up front, they don't have the things ready, or is there what could make it better to bring that percentage down?
Think that a more thorough disclosure discussion between the listing broker and the seller needs to happen. Right now, in the standard way things are done, it's just a tiny little checkbox that a seller says there have been damage disclosures, there have not been damage disclosures. If you go through the process with Current Yachts, you'll see that we actually have a whole list of have not, have not. This boat has had lightning strike, this boat has had water damage, this boat has had, and we actually make them go through a full series of disclosures where instead the normal traditional listing broker just has a checkbox of has had disclosure or has had damage or has not. And the conversation usually isn't even uh, brought up. So I think communication and disclosure statement should be more on the forefront in order to get that 10% to less.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, so it sounds like buying or selling a boat is very much like real estate, a lot of parallels. And it seems like it's still the wild, wild west a little bit out there. Maybe real estate's a little bit further ahead with what's going on with the commission structure. Yeah, I can really see the value of a yacht broker now, just with, on the buy side. Again, I figured that you would have some representation, or I'm a very trusting person. I would hope nobody's taking advantage of me, but especially when you have a dishonest seller and then the broker's trying to make commission, that's very, very risky, and on the sell side, I think trying to sell a boat when you have that emotion and you really want to get the highest amount of money, having a broker that can really look you in the eye and ask you the right questions and coach you really makes a big difference. Because if you don't do that, you'll sit on the market for 6 months and you'll eventually be brought down on your price. But by then you've done a lot more damage and now the market's changed and now your boat's going to look like nobody wants it. So I've really learned a lot today on how important it is to have a great broker.
And one of the key takeaways that I would want everyone to know from this is commission structures are negotiable. It is not set at 10%. They are absolutely negotiable, and we are here to bring that education to the table. We're offering a service-based model where you're actually paying for the things that you want, and the best of brokerage should be there at your service, and you can pay for each one of those services through Current Yachts.
Yeah, it sounds great. It sounds like you're offering the commission to co-broke anyway, so we can get out there and co-broke. And if there's only one broker involved, then why should I pay two sides of the commission? Makes sense.
And coming back to service, what we provide is full service, and as we know, relationships drive this business forward. And so we're here to be your ally, whether you're buying or selling. Two more things to remember is the platform disruption that we're experiencing now in the market, and we'll talk about that again. And then second one, definitely consider the buyer rep agreement, because unless you sign an agreement, you are working with a sub agent of the listing broker, and very few people know this. So again, thank you so much for your time to help us clarify how boats are sold, what changes are happening in the industry. In a few more episodes, we'll go over how to finance a yacht, how to insure your yacht. We'll talk about some of the advantages like tax planning that may be available if you run an active charter business. And we'll talk more about the changes of our industry as well. So we'll be publishing every Wednesday from here on out. We look forward to seeing you on Full Displacement. Thank you and fair winds.
Thanks,
There it is.
guys.